Terrorism basically is a rhetorical strategy to create violence from one group towards another by establishing a conflict between the two groups, finding as its solution a violent act. Okay, so if we look at this statement, we'll see right from the get-go, we start with the community-driven mural is one player here. The second player is installed in the alley off West Park Street, came as a surprise, there's your verb, to the Eugene Police Department. Okay, so already in this, we're getting the community-driven mural versus the Eugene Police Department. Community-driven mural installed is a passive expression, right? The community-driven mural, the mural did not install itself, but the people who are responsible have been removed from this conversation. Though, in the end, they're the people who are going to feel the results of the violence that's brought against this mural. Even though we're talking about the mural as a kind of it's not a human thing, right? We're finally talking about an action that's going to be against people, sort of behind the veil here. And this also finds the classic construction of stochastic terrorism in that what we have kind of an actor. This mural is the thing engaged in action, and the people behind engage in action who came as a surprise, are doing something to someone else. So the Eugene Police Department they're the victim. They're the victim of this mural. So the mural is created and it victimizes the police department, here expressed as surprise. Chief Skinner goes on to say, we understand the importance of art and its ability to bring communities together and to have difficult conversations. Okay, so this is another classic device of stochastic terrorism to put the narrator into the background. Chief Skinner is not speaking for himself. He's not an I. He's not saying, I understand the importance of art. He's talking for everyone in the police department. I don't really even know what that means, the importance of art. It means nothing. It's totally empty. I don't know anything about art's ability to bring communities together. I don't agree with that. So I don't think that art brings people together, but it's still totally empty. And to have difficult conversations, I don't think that that's a function of art either. Art is an expression of a point of view, which then enters the community at large as a voice of that point of view. We also understand and fully embrace the need to provide a platform for multicultural voices to be heard throughout many forms. This is, again, classic of stochastic terrorism. This organization, this victim, right, the Eugene Police Department, here is being cast as understanding. They're really understanding. They understand art, and we hear this understanding, and to have difficult conversations, their understanding of difficult conversations. They understand here again, they're very understanding, and they embrace needs. Totally empty, very classically stochastic terrorism, in that the group that's being victimized are simply amazing. They're actually kind of superhuman in their understanding of things, in their goodness, in their rightness, in their positioning. This is Chief Skinner positioning the victim as a benevolent, understanding, very human, or at least as we'd like to imagine ourselves to be, entity. And now we're going to get to the victimizer, right? So the community-driven mural. So we go back to, but some images in the mural. So this is the thing that's doing the victimizing, feel very divisive and do not seem to be in alignment with the goal of bringing community together. The most important things here are some images in the mural feel very divisive. Images can't feel things. People feel things. So really what might be expressed here is that Chief Skinner feels that some of the images are divisive. But if he were to say that, right, and not be in the background, if he were to say I, he would be suggesting his own subjectivity, and he would also be coming out from the background. You know, he'd be a person who has interests and wants certain outcomes. But instead, We get the murals, we just get this feeling of divisiveness as if it's coming objectively from the murals themselves, and do not seem to be in alignment with the goals of bringing community together. Also very, very fundamental to stochastic terrorism, that the people who victimize, okay, so that's the people behind the mural, right? Not the mural, because there's people behind actions. So the people behind the mural are not in alignment. They're not part of the community. It's outside some kind of contained idea of this audience, this group. These people are on the outside of the group. So we have an in group and an out group. And these people are outside, do not seem to be in alignment with the goals of bringing community together. So that's some goal that we all share, as he describes, bringing the community together. These people are not in that group. And building trust with public safety professionals who serve the community every day. This is a very weird statement, that somehow people are responsible for building trust with the public safety professionals. I don't even want to get into it. The trust that's been damaged has been damaged on their side because they engage with us with violence repeatedly. Now we go back to the police. If we want to look at it this way, we can say, we have this, that the mural, this is the antagonistic force, a community-driven mural. And now we have the good force of the police. The police officers hope to go their entire career without taking the life of another human being. Okay, that is an empty assertion. I mean, who's telling us that? I mean, this is Chief Skinner speaking for every single police officer, that they all hope to go their entire career without having to take the life of another human being. Maybe that sounds good. The thing is, they've gone into policing. If you don't want to take the life of another human being, you don't go into professions in which that's part of the job description, very potentially. This is empty, but goes again with the basic stochastic terrorism pattern. We know that the police department had been victimized by this mural, and what we find with them is they get cast as wholly good. They're amazing people without any self-interest. They certainly never would want to harm anyone. That's their sincere hope, is what Chief Skinner tells us. And then we hear more that we recognize the trauma and sadness when a life is taken. Okay, I'll bring up again this sort of passive expression. Okay, again, classic. So the police department, they recognize the sadness when a life is taken, but they're not actors in the taking, right? They're not saying we recognize the trauma and sadness when we, the police, kill somebody. They're not saying that. We're almost talking about something that's very euphemistically expressed as taken, like a necessary culling of the herd. When it's taken, for really good purposes. But anyway, we recognize the trauma and sadness when a life is taken, and how many lives are forever changed as a result of that deadly encounter. Okay, I really want us to pay attention to this, how many lives. That makes a certain amount of sense, because we do understand that there are people whose lives have been changed. For one, most importantly, the person who's been killed, their life has been changed. They're now dead. Two, the people whose lives have been changed forever are those who love that person. Three, the people whose lives have been changed are everyone who's sort of witnessed this, horrible act of violence and feel frightened by it. And probably very last, in terms of change, and I don't doubt that it's there, but are the people who did the killing. But those are many lives. There's a ton of people whose lives have been changed. What we now go is we ignore all of those other lives. They're not even on the page. Now we're just going to talk about the police officers. Few people, in this case, 2 people. And their families were profoundly impacted. Okay, but their lives were not profoundly impacted in the same way as a person who's killed, that their life was profoundly impacted, or the people who love that person, how they were profoundly impacted. So I think we have to be honest about that by the events that happened that day. We've gone from many to very few. So when we do that, all these other people are actually cut out. the entire rest of this group, there's many lives that we were accepting. The benevolent police officers telling us about how they recognize the trauma and sadness, but they don't talk about that trauma and sadness whatsoever in this piece. Chief Skinner does not address it. Two police officers were not only confronted with their own survival, were confronted, again, that's passive. And I'll point out that survival can't confront anyone. But we're hearing here that their lives were threatened. The victim of this shooting, that was also a threatened life. Two police officers also had to reconcile the thought of taking another human life. We hear, in a sense, here, do this in red, two police officers were not only confronted with their own survival, that's the bad action by the victimizer, and then we have, but also had to reconcile the thought of taking another human life, the good, noble action of the police officer. So while they're confronted with death from a killer, they taking another human life. They're in a position of this is a narrative where they are really good, and the person who wishes to victimize them is really completely bad. This mural and the choice to include, I'll go back to the choice to include, the mural isn't making choices. People make choices. So we're talking about people. So stochastic terrorism targets people for retaliation for this perceived assault. We have no idea. I'm not hearing from the people who painted the mural, who expressed some kind of sense of what its purpose was. All I'm getting is that this mural is an attack on police officers. That's it. Who are good and passive, this is classic, good and passive victims of this completely unreasonable assault. The mural and the choice to include certain images seems to contribute to ongoing trauma and pain felt by many. So the mural and the choice seems to be purposely contributing to pain and trauma. The people who painted the mural are purposely trying to inflict pain and trauma upon the good, passive victims, the police, and these officers who feel the pain of having to cull this life so greatly. But this is an example of stochastic terrorism because it essentially pits a dehumanized, aggressive force against evil force, against a passive, good, victimized force, the police in this instance, and targets this mural as the thing that's responsible, the mural and the people who painted it, as responsible for causing pain and trauma to the good, passive victim. And it's a call to engage in violence against those victimizers in support of the victim, who the audience feels as being like themselves, noble and good. Noble and good people are being victimized by evil out-group people. Remember the out-group? Out-group, in-group, noble, good, in-group people are being victimized by that out-group, and therefore we need to engage in action against that